Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Can you type Y in the chat if you can hear me? Awesome. Okay. Good evening, developers, digital professionals. Welcome to our 5th Career Day. Jamaican Developers Community, as you know, we are a community of creative thinkers and thought leaders dedicated to improving and building a tech ecosystem in the Caribbean for us to grow and thrive as developers, and for the Caribbean to become a producer of technology instead of a consumer of technology. Today, we are going to be looking at career options in DevOps and how you can get into DevOps and how you can make yourself more marketable as a DevOps engineer. And we have two very brilliant, very qualified speakers with us this evening. With us, we have our event organizer, O'Shane Bailey. As you know, he is also the co-founder of one of our sponsors, Asub Limited, a venture studio dedicated to solving problems, real-world problems through AI and automation and digital transformation. We also have myself, Latifa Smelly. I am your communications officer for Jamaican Developers Community. And as usual, you can reach me on social media at RayverdLS. Also reach out to me on WhatsApp or Telegram if you have any concerns regarding the community or any queries. And also, if you are interested in displaying at our demo day events, we are filling our roster for those going into next year, so you can reach out to me for those as well. Okay, so today we'll be looking at DevOps, and as you know, DevOps creates an intersection between, pardon my background. Okay, yes, DevOps creates an intersection between the developer world and operation world, so infrastructure. And today, to talk to us more about careers in DevOps, we have Dale Kurt Murray, engineer, technical solutions architect and DevOps engineer, now working at Lunar Ops Inc., as well as Adobe, and Randolph McClean, technical architect from Particular Presence Technology, also one of our sponsors. And before we go further, we'd just like to shout out again to all our sponsors, Asub Limited, Vertis Technology Solutions, and Particular Presence Technologies. If you didn't see them in the sponsor reel before, we'll go over their details at the end of the programming. So let's move forward. Our first speaker for today is going to be Mr. Dale Kurt Murray. He is the Director of Operations and Engineering at Lunar Ops Inc., a company based in New York, infrastructure company based in New York. And he also just recently left Frame.io and started as site reliability engineer at Adobe. I'm sure a lot of persons will be interested to hear about that journey. Dale Kurt Murray has also had the opportunity to mentor several persons, and his focus and experience is in cloud infrastructure and reliability engineering. And so I'll allow him to take over and tell you a little bit more about his journey in DevOps and just how you can get to where he has been, where he has gone. Yeah. Dale Kurt?
Hey, thank you, Latifa. All right, I do have a presentation to share. Let me just get on the screen. All right, and just one minor correction. All right, so we're actually going through a transition between Frame.io and Adobe, who actually acquired Frame.io earlier this year, I think last quarter. So it's not really shift so much of changing jobs, but actually just going through an acquisition. But I'll tell you a little bit more about that. I believe everyone can actually see the share. All right, so I'll just pretty much go through giving you a quick overview on my overall career path. As you know, I'm Dale Kurt Murray. I'm here because I love technology and the community itself. I focus heavily on Linux, open source software, DevOps, and cloud native technologies. I do enjoy a good cup of coffee, so especially Blue Mountain, especially being here in New York. Photography, and recently I've taken up hiking. Pretty much to just get out of the house a little bit more. You can find me on most of the popular social media, which is Twitter, Instagram, and GitHub. So a little bit about myself and my career. Over the last 15 years, I've actually gone through a number of steps or roles, pretty much building up to this point. I started out as a Linux system administrator, and that I have to credit to the Jamaica Linux user group. They were very instrumental in actually training individuals at that time to learn about Linux, especially in the enterprise setting. That led me to I would say my very first real job as a Linux engineer at Flow in their very first and early startup days. From there, I actually started to work remotely as a cloud engineer, primarily with companies in the United States, India, and in Europe. I've actually worked with a lot of New York-based startups on site. Since I moved to New York, my first one was more in healthcare. More recently, I actually transitioned to Frame.io, which was last year, right at the peak of the pandemic. So that was a pretty scary time to have done that. But it did work out pretty well. I actually started my own company, consulting with Jamaican companies, primarily within the financial industry, pretty much adopting DevOps as a part of their culture. This has actually been formulated with a collaboration with Vertex Technologies as well, our actual partner in Jamaica. And as site reliability engineer at Frame, as I mentioned before, we actually got acquired by Adobe. Frame.io is an actual collaboration tool for post-production in the movie industry. So you'll find a lot of marketing companies, movie studios who actually will use our tooling to collaborate. So especially during the pandemic, it was very instrumental in a lot of the movies that you actually see now, like Dune, which our tool was actually used. We actually recently put out a new feature, which was camera to cloud, where you can actually film on set and your directors can be in a remote location because you're actually viewing this live on like an iPad or a desktop or engineering bay. All right, so the intent of this session is really just to get you thinking about a career in DevOps, get you excited about that, let you know what is possible, and pretty much offer some of the resources that are out there to get acclimated to it, and build your skill sets along that way. So, as we know, technology is changing, and so are the careers behind it. This role that I'm currently occupying did not exist 10 years ago. Roles will actually be created to suit the needs of companies, and that can be pretty much anything. We may retitle things, the job description may change, the roles and responsibilities may change along with the technologies. And just to speak more in terms of DevOps, just for those who may or may not know, and this is pretty much coined from Donovan Brown from Microsoft. So this was really taken from the Microsoft Azure site, where it says DevOps is the unit of people, processes, technologies to continually provide value to customers. And that pretty much is what we do. And our customers tend to be more, internal from my own experience, as well as some external. But what does that encompass overall? I would sum these up to 4 things. Just IAC, which is infrastructure as code. Some of you may be familiar with like CloudFormation, which is native to AWS, Terraform, So we tend to build out a lot of our infrastructure pipelines using these tools and technologies. The other thing is CI/CD, which is continuous integration and continuous deployment. Some people also say continuous delivery, which is the build and release. One of my first roles moving to New York with a startup was really as a release engineer, which morphed into also taking on some of the DevOps roles as well. And one of the biggest things is our automation, how we recover rollback. And this will go over into other areas as well. You know, pretty much automating as many tasks as possible. Not all tasks really need to be automated, but you know, with some reasonable accommodations, you can actually automate a lot of the processes that we tend to do over and over again. Then there's also monitoring, which is one of the key things that we've been focusing on now, setting up what our baselines are in terms of how our applications are used and how they should respond to certain thresholds, how they respond to failures as well, recovery, being able to monitor those metrics and actually trace errors as well in terms of figuring out what the issues are and how to actually remediate those things. More recently, my own experience and training has also gone off into also a bit more of the security as well. So you may be familiar with DevSecOps. So we work very closely with our security team, planning pretty much how we view our threat models. We design those things based on the threats that we can identify and how we'd actually action on any vulnerabilities that may be exploited, how we'd remediate. As well, one of the more recent projects I worked on was pretty much building a service to do automated scanning of assets that are uploaded. In the industry that we work in, we do accept a lot of user files, user-generated files, which can be pretty much be embedded with payloads. So my role or my task was really to design an antivirus scanning service. The one we had initially was based on using a single instance to pretty much scan all the assets. And if you know or familiar with that industry, we can receive up to millions of assets in a day. And this can be from a very small file. It could be a script. It could be images from the set, or just video files or PDFs. And with a single instance that doesn't actually scale, there are limitations there. So my solution was actually to use like a serverless function that would actually look at the triggers on once an asset is uploaded. It did a separate function that actually grabs an update, and then the other function would just do all the scanning. So we know that function can actually scale to accommodate for all those files that are being uploaded. Continuous learning. So similar like or CI/CD, I try to continually learn new technologies that can be implemented, that can be adapted to new problems in an industry. And there are a number of resources, but there are three pillars that really fuel this for me. And this is just for me personally. One is to really gain knowledge, the experience, and I do that through my own curiosity. And what really facilitates that is what I have at home is, I try to make it as accommodating as possible, where I can actually experiment and fail in private, you know. So I'll build out a home lab. And if you're familiar with any New York apartments, they're very small. So the footprint for my own home lab had to be pretty much accommodate for that. So I have a very small Intel NUC that runs, I think, a maximum of like 10 VMs on it using Proxmox. Additionally, I have a small Raspberry Pi cluster, which is again a physical, and I would have like a Kubernetes cluster that spans from VMs into Raspberry Pis. Additionally, I'll have like a virtual load balancer that can allow services on the network to be exposed publicly, or it can be exposed privately. as well, and everything is pretty much driven by code using GitOps. So just like how I would operate at work is the same discipline I'll take into my own infrastructure at home. So I'll write everything as declared code. I'll commit that to a repository, even though it's just me. It gets approved, do a pull request. I'll even go as far as doing documentation on that. So I can actually repeat those steps and then later on possibly automate those steps. One of the things I actually did automate was the provisioning of a VM image with Proxmox using Packer and Ansible. So that again is all code. If I need to add something like Falco to a base image, I can just do that on it, do a spin up and start replacing all the images as well. And just to speak up a little more on the automation side of things, even with the repositories that I have, again, because there tend to be vulnerabilities that may happen over time, I do have another bot that actually goes through the code, look for versions that are pinned and do updates for them that actually create their own pull requests. I have my own Slack channel for things like those. So once there's a commit that's done, that's tracked in the Slack channel. So I know when a bot actually does put out a new release as well. And then that gets deployed to the cluster as well. So how did I learn? And I think this can be a guide for pretty much anyone. Over the last couple of years, I've actually mentored other individuals to get into the space, whether it be like interview prep, helping them with their resume. I recently helped someone who became a good friend of mine now, moving from the military to pretty much a tech position. And this was pretty much having him learn a little bit more about Linux and the CLI. And I'm there to pretty much, pretty much coach him as well. Learn about Git. I would definitely recommend both languages for Python and Go. A lot of the cloud native tools are written in Go. And a lot of times you'll find yourself manipulating data as well, which Python is very strong with. Learning a cloud platform, AWS, GCP, Azure, they're all pretty much the same, just different terminologies all the way around. But I think if I were pushing anyone to actually learn about the cloud, it would definitely be on AWS first and then transition to any other platform. One is more recognized. So even if you're looking at going or building a career for yourself, you find that AWS is one of the top three. And the top three really are AWS, GCP, and Azure. And they'll shift grounds over time, but AWS will be the more popular one. Definitely learning about containers, primarily Docker, as a bigger container. There are other containers out there as well, but Docker will definitely give you some good foundation as well. And then CI/CD, a lot of persons that might be familiar with like Jenkins or Circle CI, Travis, and there are a number of them. How I decide to learn a new technology, I would look at what persons are looking for in terms of what job descriptions are, what the stacks are for different companies as well, to see where the popularity or where the trends are with these different technologies. More recently, we started to learn among our team about temporal as well, so we can handle like some event-based transactions or job tasks that can be orchestrated there as well. And we've actually built out some of our more manual tasks to be driven through temporal, like checking for dangling DNS entries so that we don't end up with takeovers. So we'll alert us on that and actually automate the process of removing or tagging them for removal. Two books I definitely recommend. The Phoenix Project, which pretty much outlines a fictional company that goes through what you can actually relate to an environment you would be more accustomed to, the chaotic environment, and how DevOps actually was introduced and pretty much help to streamline that a bit. It speaks more around the culture itself, but it does break out into other aspects of it altogether. The DevOps handbook is more a more in-depth look into it. I do recommend them both. So one of the key things I had to learn was really knowing your value. I know working in the Caribbean, working in Jamaica, which I did for several years, one of the things that you will encounter is you're not valued or compensated as your skill sets actually commands, right? I know moving from the Caribbean to New York or the United States itself, how things are viewed are a little different. So the numbers I'm actually going to share with you is based on the United States. I don't think that's transferable to Jamaica, but you can actually use that as a base as well. And pretty much for anyone who's actually looking to work for any US companies remotely. So this is really taken from levels.fyi, which is a pretty good site for actually looking at compensations across the board. And just to even understand what compensations are, this can include your salary, plus bonuses, plus even like stocks, right? And this can accumulate to a significant amount based on what the company or how it has structured, or even your own negotiating power, right? So the median compensation right now for the DevOps engineer is 154K, and this is the 50th percentile range. You can find others that will go as far up to even 500K, right? And these can be unique situations, but I think anywhere between the 50th to 90th is reasonable. Not really a unicorn in the industry, honestly working for a unicorn. But starting around there is a pretty good start, you know. So I'll pause here and take any questions that you may have.
Okay, do we have any questions from our audience?
Yeah, you can put them in. You can put them in the chat, or I guess you can unmute as well. Latifa?
Yes, you can unmute and ask your questions as well. I'm not seeing any raised hands. Okay, Glenford, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hey, good night. So you mentioned infrastructure as code. You mentioned Terraform. Is Terraform the standard now? You know, I've seen a tool called Pulumi, if that's how it's pronounced, but I'm not sure how how well accepted it is everyone moving towards Terraform?
So I would say Terraform is at the pinnacle of it. I mean, any technology can get bumped off at any time. I guess with popularity, you'll find that a lot of engineers, like software engineers or production engineers, tend to transition to DevOps. So a tool like Pulumi would, be embraced by them. AWS did also put out their CDK, which is also based on programming languages. So it's using their own DSLs to write infrastructure as code. Again, trying to satisfy everyone. Terraform, as you know, is a more HashiCorp based on their HCL. I think it's easy to read Terraform code if you're not familiar with code. Now, my own journey did not take me along the path of learning code like that. I can write a bit if I need to. I see that right now as my own skill gap that I'm trying to fill. But I think pretty much everyone is going to lean towards the Terraform because it's more popular. So I would say yes, it is a standard in itself. But again, standards do change over time. All right, I see a question in the chat as well.
Yes, so Cassandra is asking, Yeah, so great talk so far. As a DevOps engineer, how heavily do you rely on coding as a part of your job? And also, is documentation a significant aspect of your work?
All right, thank you. So personally, I don't rely heavily on coding so much. However, I do identify it as a skill gap. So even right now, I'm teaching myself because I'm primarily self-taught, pretty much with everything. So I went as far as start buying books on like Python, kind of trying to learn that. So I've stacks of books on the wall right now on different aspects like security and coding. So I definitely do advocate for someone learning Python and Go for DevOps. But personally, and I'm very transparent even during the interview process, you know, in terms of where my knowledge is and what is that I can do, right? Whatever I can do, I try to do it as best as possible. So my next step is learning Python, learning Go, so I can actually keep up and actually build my own tooling, you know. And I find at times that you're going to want to interact with a lot of APIs, manipulate data. You want to automate a lot of these tasks. It does help. It greatly helps. So I would say yes. For documentation, I say it's very significant because as your team grows and you become, you don't become the silo for knowledge, because you don't spend all your time having to reiterate things you have actually spoken about already. You want to be able to share knowledge. You want to even start establishing what is called architectural design records, where you make a decision as to a change on your infrastructure. To document, you know, this is what we're trying to solve for. This is what we had at the time. Who made those decisions, and you know, anything that's pertinent to that decision itself. From there, someone can actually look back and say, oh, you know, this technology exists now. I see what the limitations were at that time, and now we can make another decision with the technology that exists there. So documentation is very significant.
Okay, great. So the next question is, well, essentially, where are the best places to find DevOps jobs?
The best places, so there are a few things that I did before actually even moving to New York, which was pretty much establishing a presence online. This was like LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, GitHub, and pretty much putting myself out there. I went as far as buying my own domain name and setting myself up there. So I was going into this as professional as possible. Fortunately, recruiters found me based on those actions. But I find that if you're looking, LinkedIn is a very good resource. Monster, and there are a few more there. I mean, you'll get hounded by third-party recruiters as well, which you may want to avoid because you don't want to end up in a very weird situation. Networking is a very good way of doing that as well. Groups, I mean, community groups like this works. But if you're doing it remotely, I definitely would actually say, hey, you know, LinkedIn. I think if you focus a lot on where your career is and what you're working on and what you're doing, as well, if you document even stuff that you're working on, because like for me, I'll document things about how I built my home lab. You know, I'll participate in events like this as well to get and gain some exposure. But yeah, that's it.
Okay, so we have two more questions, or three more questions, and then we're going to hold until the end of Randolph's presentation. So if you have any more questions, you can drop them in the chat, but we are going to move on to Randolph after these three. So I'm just going to go through all of them in one row. Does full stack development cover DevOps? What certificates or certifications would be important to this field? And are there any roadmaps that persons can follow as a guide if they're looking to get into it, especially if they are self-taught, and that is separate from the suggested texts?
Okay, so the first one, no. full stack is not a part of DevOps. And I said it very loosely as well. I guess if you're doing like your own CI/CD pipelines, then yes, it would be. But I tend to not spread myself mentally thin and kind of focus on specific aspects of things. So like a full stack engineer expects to be well-rounded. That can be good and that can be bad. Again, that depends on your personality. In terms of certifications, to be honest, and again, this is my own experience with it. Employees don't care. They care about your experience and your personality. I have 3 certifications right now, and they're all because I wanted to prove to myself that I could actually pass the exam and where my knowledge was at the time. But it's not something that's asked in an interview. It's pretty much focused on where you are and your experience. So can you do the job, pretty much? And that works. In terms of roadmap, I think a roadmap really is your own personal thing. Yes, you can find roadmaps out there. For me, it was really learning the fundamentals, networking, Linux, learning Git, learning containers, learning how to do VMs, learning how to do some bit of automation, and learning at least 2 languages in itself. Your own journey or your own roadmap could be totally different. Again, I use like what's it called? Stackshare to look at companies and what they are using and what they're using in their DevOps. And then I'll look at, oh, this is a new technology. I mean, I've heard about it. It might be something that's on CNCF as well. That's out and new, because again, technology changes. What you learn and what you need to learn may also change. I hope that answers the questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Dale Kurt. So that presentation was so valuable, it probably should almost be sold for. So I'm sure there are lots of persons who are or maybe feeling a little overwhelmed. There are lots of talks in the groups about working remotely and salary discussion. So I know a lot of persons will find that information useful as well. I'm just going to remind everyone that if you didn't catch any of the information, we are going to be posting the recording for this session directly after on the community forum. And at a later date, the edited version will be posted on our YouTube page as well. But in the interest of time, thank you very much, Dale Kurt. So we're just going to move straight on to our next speaker, Randolph McClean. And Randolph works for one of our sponsors, Particular Presence Technologies. He is their technical architect, and he himself is also an Amazon certified developer and Microsoft certified developer professional. With 9 years of experience, he is adept at simplifying complex tasks and has been building his expertise with cloud architecture and distributed systems. So I'll now allow him to take over. Randolph?
Thank you, Latifa. Where is my camera? 1 second. Strange. Oh, oops. Sorry about that. Hi. Everyone see me fine?
Yes.
Okay, so I have no presentation for this. I felt it would have been a bit of unfair to put everything in a slide. So it's going to be a very open forum presentation. I'm just going to tell you about my experiences as a technical architect, which includes DevOps responsibilities, what to look for in yourself to know if this is a right fit for you, and actually a practical example, not a practical example, but a day-to-day experience of what you may go through as a DevOps engineer, to know if this is something that you actually want to do. So a bit about me. I am technical architect for PPT, as Latifa said. I was officially working from before my third year of completing university, and believe it or not, I didn't want to do IT at first. It wasn't something that I found interesting because I believe of how it was taught to me. But once I looked into it for myself, I discovered that being in IT is like being a child in a playroom where everything is available to you and you're limited only by your imagination and your expertise. So with that out of the way, I'll tell you about my views of the DevOps profession. So anywhere you look up for a definition of DevOps, they will say it is a combination of development and operations, and that's how they got the term, and which is very true. And many people tend to focus on the development aspect of it because most persons who look into DevOps come from a heavy IT background. But the real benefit of DevOps, in my opinion, is how it optimizes the operations of the organization in which adopts its practices. So for those who don't know what to identify as IT operations is anything that takes place after you send your code somewhere, which enables consistency, reliability, and monitoring of an IT system. So it could be something as simple as migrating logs from one place to another. It can be scheduled backups of critical systems to ensure that should there be a disaster, you can recover as quickly as possible. It can be something as simple as restarting a cloud server as quickly as possible. As a DevOps engineer, you are really focusing on how best to leverage the tools at your disposal in order to improve the experience of not only end users, such as customers and clients, but also persons within your own organization. Because as the DevOps engineer, you are, as I said, in charge of operations as well as things like development pipelines. So you then become, I guess, the control tower for efficiency and reliability within your system, where the developers will create new features and respond to the help desk requests and things like that. You, as the DevOps engineer, are really always monitoring and looking out for opportunities to improve something that you believe is taking too long. So let me give you a simple example. You could have a situation where developers need to back up a production database before every deployment. You could notice that that is being done manually, which is taking maybe 15 minutes. And so that deployment will take 15 minutes plus the time to start the actual release of your new features. As a DevOps engineer, you should be able to identify where you can automate that process. So this 15-minute backup process can be done in 30 seconds, for example, which would then improve not just that process, but the entire deployment process. Therefore, making a 20-minute operation now take 3 minutes. And that is where a lot of the value for a company comes from as a DevOps engineer. If you can create a space for improvement and consistency. That is how you really demonstrate your value as being a master of your craft. I believe Dale mentioned it earlier. Knowledge, experience, and exploration. Those, I think, are, if that was it, I hope I remember them correctly. Those really are key personality traits that are needed to thrive, because knowing the overall concept of being a DevOps engineer is important. It's important to know your responsibilities, but in order to grow your skill set and your arsenal, really, you need to familiarize yourself with the current best practices in the field, as well as make yourself aware of the various technologies available and how they can fit into your company's ecosystem. Because just because something is popular and highly beneficial doesn't necessarily mean it's beneficial for you in your company. I'll give you an example. Everyone here who knows about modern cloud architectures or anything about any modern system knows that microservices are very, very useful when it comes to scalability and recovery, because should one service go down, your entire system will not go down. However, applying something like microservices to a small company may involve excessive overhead that this company will not actually benefit from. So I guess you can think about it as saying, everyone knows that milk is good for you, but if you're not short on calcium and water is cheaper, why spend the money to buy a milk? So that's a good little way to think about how to approach the tools and skill sets necessary for executing your role. Another thing to note about DevOps, as I said, you become somewhat the control tower, in a sense, for certain events in your organization, and as such, your influence over the general culture or the benefits of adopting the DevOps mindset will grow based on the scale of the company. So as a DevOps engineer, you will notice that as you improve various internal operations, other persons will start to work better or be more productive because they're no longer spending time on mundane tasks, because you identified an area where a manual operation can easily be automated. And so this person no longer has to take time out of their day to, I guess, send off this report or just whatever it may be, because you identified that based on the tools available, various CLIs, CDKs, APIs, things like that, you can have systems communicate directly and just completely free up time for persons across the entire organization. And that is also demonstrating value. The ability to get more out of something you already have is really invaluable. some things that some necessary technical skills that you would need as a DevOps engineer. As Dale said again, Python, Golang, very popular when it comes to scripting. But overall, you need to know, be very efficient when it comes to writing scripts and writing scripts to interact with various tools that you have in your organization. So familiarize yourself with the tools. Have a repository of pre-made scripts for standard operations of those tools. And then when you notice a need for something, just draw for those scripts, arrange them how they need to be arranged, parameterize them, and have them look out for certain events in your infrastructure to just run this operation. So it never has to be, it can never be overlooked again because it's now automatic. Something to really note about DevOps or the tools of DevOps. A lot of the DevOps efficiency and automation relies on the ability of your chosen tool set to trigger events as well as respond to events. Because you can have the most amazing infrastructure set up, but if it cannot alert or start a process by itself or be started automatically, then you just added extra steps to a process that could have been simplified. So one popular example of this is, not sure if it, for persons who use the various cloud platforms, many of them have webhooks, so that when you send over, make a push to the repository, you can trigger some event somewhere else. Things like that indicate, or things like that are indicative of a system that knows that it is a part of a bigger process. And so long as you are aware of that capability of your tool, as well as the capabilities of other tools down the line to respond to that, the limit to what you can do is really just based on your imagination and, again, necessities of your company. I had something else I would have loved to present on. 1 second, please. Okay. So when it comes to getting into the DevOps field, I believe it is really a matter of experience, because I would find it very, very unlikely for someone with no IT background to choose this as their starting point into IT, because it's definitely more of an intermediate to advanced career path, because coming into DevOps, it assumes that you have a lot of fundamental knowledge mastered, or a high level of comfort in these fundamentals. Because if you are getting into a DevOps field and you're unfamiliar with command line interfaces, then it's not going to be a pleasant experience. So getting into DevOps field is a matter of just building your skill set as I don't want to say anything, but there are a wide range of entry-level IT positions that can then transition into DevOps. The most obvious one being developer and sysadmin. Things like roles like that expose you to practices that are universally used in DevOps, such as orchestration, automation, templating, triggers, events, event buses, things like that. So it's definitely a matter of growing into it or growing for it than just diving headfirst into it, because as I said, there's so much you need to be familiar with before you can become effective in it. The negative aspects of the DevOps field is that, again, your impact is, as I said, based on the scale of the organization that you're working in. So while you may be, so if you're in a small company, for example, you may discover that there may not be a dedicated DevOps position, as the need for that, or although it will be beneficial, it wouldn't be a feasible approach financially to hire someone for that position based on the size of your company. However, that doesn't mean that you as a developer can't adopt some DevOps practices to make your job more effective. Because as I said, DevOps is everything that happens after you send something somewhere. So if you notice, even as a developer, that you can automate some of the tasks that you're required to do after working on a code, on a feature or a solution or whatever it is really. Once you have made that process more efficient and reliably available, you have adopted DevOps practices, because DevOps isn't an activity, it's essentially a philosophy of making things run better. I believe Dale had a very good graph of expected salary ranges. Based on my research, that was the same range I was going to speak on. As a DevOps engineer, because you primarily interact with IT systems, it is one of those positions that is readily available to be done remotely. And so should you want to take that leap after you gain your experience, as I mentioned before, if you want to take that leap into DevOps, to really get into it, it may be most beneficial to work remotely for a larger organization where the need for it is more visible, which would allow you to really just explore the capabilities of your position. I don't believe there was anything, I had anything else I wanted to bring up for this presentation. So should there be any questions, feel free to ask them now.
Okay, thank you, Randolph. Yes, so we just got a new refreshing perspective from our engineer based in Jamaica. And I'm sure if anyone has any questions, let's just go through those before we go back to the general session. You can type them in the chat, and you can also raise your hand and we'll select you. Okay, so while persons are typing, Randall, I would just like to thank you for highlighting the importance and the power of DevOps. We went through that before, but it was good to highlight that. So we've gotten all the details on what we need to enter this career and to make ourselves viable candidates, but we also can come away with understanding of why this career path is important to begin with. Okay, so question in the chat from Cassandra Bartley. Do you have any specific free resources to learn more about DevOps?
YouTube. Okay, but for real, so again, you are caught up with this. The resources available for DevOps practically are the various DevOps tools that are available. Things like TeamCity, the various cloud repositories, AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure. Azure Azure love charge people. Don't, please, yeah, forget I said that one. But feel free to explore like free tiers of platforms like AWS, TeamCity, Octopus, Jenkins. These are all very popular tools in DevOps when it comes to the CI/CD aspect or infrastructure as code in AWS and GCP. There is also the various monitoring tools such as Sumo Logic. None of them are coming to mind right now. Datadog.
New Relic as well is a good one.
Yeah, New Relic is good. That's really good. The important thing to know is that there are there are key points in the DevOps cycle that would have different tools and skill sets required. You have the CI/CD aspect of it, the monitoring aspect, and the infrastructure as code, which would lead to reliability and sustainability. So should you, depending on which aspect you want to look into, there's a myriad of free tools in every category of that life cycle, which you can use to just build your skill set. Like I said, it's really just about being a kid in a playroom and just find toys and play with them. And once you master it, move on to the next one.
Yeah. Could I jump in on this as well?
Sure.
Yeah. So your first resource for YouTube, jokingly, I would agree with that as well. I find that Free Code Camp, it has very good resources. You'll always find person also walking you through different DevOps tooling and the process as well. Especially if you're going to learn about like Git, containers, CI/CD, and so on. So as YouTube is as free as it really gets, I think any investment you make in yourself is going to be worth it. You're your best possible investment vehicle in itself. So at some point, you're going to want to spend some money, on certain things, even just to get familiar with them. AWS does have a free tier as well, which does give you some experience to get into it. But if you do decide to go with the route of training, then you're going to spend some money. I don't think anyone should rely on any employer to drive that in itself. If you're earning enough to venture into that path, I think you should, even if it's just on your own.
That's very true. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Shane, do you have any thoughts on this as well? Okay, we'll get back to Shane in a bit. So the last question in the chat, well, also from Shane, what tools, and you both addressed this earlier, but what tools do you use on a day-to-day basis, particularly Randolph, and what's your general approach to solving an infrastructure problem or any DevOps problem?
Okay. Any problem is kind of broad, but a context is important. But when it comes to tools, on a day-to-day basis, we use tools like we use CloudFormation, we use TeamCity, Octopus, monitoring in. We're AWS partners, so a lot of our tools are based in AWS. So we use CloudWatch for monitoring and reporting, alerting. We use tools like TeamCity and Octopus for our various on-site deployments for clients that don't have cloud infrastructure to get it into their system. We have tools like, what's it called? Uptime bot, which alerts us if something goes down. We have various alerts set on resources to know if something is off. And yeah.
Yeah, like other tools that I would even look at is like Prometheus and Grafana for actually aggregating like your logs, visualizing them. Yeah, Datadog we use heavily right now, which we're also transitioning to using Prometheus and using other tools like Loki. But I think if you're going to actually get into this field, and what I did personally was to pretty much write down what it is that or where the trends are, looking at what other persons or other teams are using, right? What other teams are using, and learn those, pretty much writing them down and actually learning them, finding some level of a foundation in doing so as well. Don't spread yourself too thin, because again, the technology changes very quickly, especially in the CNCF. You'll find that tools will be short-lived. Some of them will graduate as well. So looking at those as well as, again, what companies are using, because you don't want to get in a situation where you're learning something that really no one is actually interested in, or it has a very niche community behind it.
Thank you, Dale. All right, to add to some of the point that was made earlier, as a developer, full stack developer, one of the ways I tend to learn, and I would also recommend this, definitely start by identifying an issue, a problem. Think about like a project that you could approach or to optimize, because the thing is that learning these tools will get you to know the technology, but you also need to have that analytical background to identify, analyze, and pretty much scope out an issue to see what the problem is, or you can optimize it, and then think about how you break that problem down in solvable micro solutions to then fit into the big picture of what the company or what the project is about. So if you're new, it's definitely just think about like some form of operational problem like infrastructure. How would you build a sustainable, scalable infrastructure? To start to do those little research, what are other companies are looking for, what other companies are doing to solve these problems. Then how do they optimize on like database logs, how they optimize on what the marketing, because a part of DevOps is, of course, the people, the process, building the software and having that infrastructure to support the software. That's one aspect of it, but you also need to know how it interact with the people or the marketing team, the customer engagement team, how they will use the infrastructure that you have or built to optimize the human process as well. So the question that I had posed earlier is geared towards both you, Kirk and Ran. How do you break down like a process or a pathway of solving an issue? But I pretty much shared my chain of thought how I normally do it. But for you, what would you do in that case?
So for me, I try to take the most simplest approach. So say, for example, I just want to be able to take the engineer's code and be able to containerize it. That'll be my first logical step. Then I may want to make sure that I can perform unit tests against that. That be my next step. I mean, maybe want to check for security vulnerabilities. That's another step. And then bringing that from a container, storing it somewhere, and deploying it into some orchestration tool like Kubernetes. You know, so pretty much the problem would be, how do I bring my code from the developer's machine into production? What does that process look like? You know, what is it that I would need to do? And then I can actually chart that out and actually start building on that and improving as well.
Okay, thanks, Kirk. Ran, do you have anything to add on that?
I believe I missed the first part of what you're saying. I lost connectivity. I believe you're asking how you respond to failures or something like that.
Well, it's geared towards the approach of that you would take to implement a DevOps process or deployment or so forth. So like, for example, they'll pretty much start by containerizing it, doing testing, and then how to move that to production and have a streamlined pipeline, CI/CD pipeline, to get the developer code from their machine, build, test, and deploy. So for you, what would you normally do in like that process to build out your process?
Oh, okay. I mean, that is a pretty standard approach. It's really just a matter of tooling. Just find out what is needed to get the source code into a reliable state, whether it's making sure that all your build runners have the correct libraries and infrastructure, or pull down a container from Docker to their libraries to build that sort of application with a node, or get it into a package. Ensure that the necessary configurations for whichever destination it's going to is a part of the pipeline, because I can assure you some of my biggest headaches that I've ever had at work have come from bad configurations, unexpected behaviors. So ensure that things like whatever is environment dependent, have that be a part of your pipeline as well. Ensure that these things are validated against. Of course, testing should be one of the first steps, as in if the test fails, don't do anything else. Just tell them, sort it out. But But outside of that, just identifying what kind of destination it's going to and which tools are best for delivering to that destination. You know, when it comes to cloud infrastructure, you have things like Terraform and AWS CDK, which are designed to provision resources in the cloud, but not everyone's system is in the cloud. So you may have to start from both ends and see where you can meet in the middle. So you know that your CI/CD pipeline can get you to this point, but how does your client system end up receiving from this point? And then you go to your client or whoever it may be, and then you build a bridge from that place to the source of your payload, and then it's over from there.
Okay, thank you very much, Randolph and Dale. Thank you as well, O'Shane. So we're now up on time. So we're going to end. There a few questions were asked and responded to in the chat. So when we post the recording for this session, we'll also post those questions and responses on the community forum. Before we close out, we'd just like to thank our speakers, Dale Kirk-Murray and Randolph McClean again. And we'd also like to give a shout out to our sponsors, Adobe Limited, Particular Presence, which is a software house based in Kingston, focused on pragmatic approaches to problem solving using technology. They come to the table with an open mind and simplify your problem to give you a successful result that brings joy. And then we also have Vertis Technology Solutions, which is another IT service and solutions provider partnering with clients to foster technology innovation. They simplify your IT complexity and transform your business to give you a return on investment. With that, we are going to close out the session. Just a reminder, you can find Jamaican Developers Community on social media at JamDevCo. If you want to find previous recordings to other events, you can check us on our YouTube page, as well as on the community forum. And you can also join the Telegram chat, which O'Shane has just posted in the Zoom chat. And with that, I'll adjourn the event. Thank you very much for attending, and we hope to see you at our next event, which is our demo day for next Tuesday, November 30th. Thank you.